Hello! Today I just want to quickly run through a new set of impulse responses by Bogren called Downtuned guitars. Some of you may know I was really excited about this one because there was one thing that bothered me with the rhythm pack is that I thought it was perfect if you were riffing like thrash riffs or like higher up standard tuning, you know. But I felt like I constantly had to play with the low mid settings of my amps because I thought they didn't hold up that well when I was going really low. And like, it was missing something for me for the lowest tunings that I wanted to use. So when I saw they were releasing one specifically for down tuning, I was so happy. I'm gonna load the IRs in the Neural DSP Nameless plugin that I really like. The only other plugin I'm using here is a limiter, and it's not doing anything, it's just preventing the signal from clipping. And I'm gonna be playing an Ibanez M80M, which I tuned in a kind of baritone way where everything is a fourth lower than standard A string tuning. So the F sharp is now my 7th string. And below that I have a C sharp. So the pack comes with 30 IRs and they're in WAV format, so you can load them pretty much anywhere that accepts WAV files. I loaded them in my XFX as well for everyday playing. It's gonna be easier to show to you if I do it in a plugin. So here's the very first one that comes up, the Bogren Downtuned. See, right away, this is like a bread and butter IR. I would put this anywhere. That's kind of the selling point to me in Bogren digital IRs. You don't have like 10 billion WAV files and you spend, 30 days just going through them and finding something that works if you EQ it later or something. They give you like 30 mix-ready tones and they don't sound the same as you would have in a traditional IR or a real cab or something. It's pretty EQ'd already. It's so good for mixing because they don't need EQ. You don't need to have EQ afterwards. You can, of course, but you don't need to do it. All of them sound like a finished record. You know what I mean? Wait for no man. Yeah, this kind of works everywhere, I think. Coroner. Meter. This one has a kind of high end that has a little bit more of this death metal fizz to it. I would use that for kind of more brutal styles, I think, if I was mixing something really... or something with a lot of palm mute. When impulse responses have a little bit more of that 5K, 6K bob something naturally with that EQ, I kind of like using them for stuff that has like really precise palm muting, you know. Mom got a duck. A bit less high-end on this one, maybe a bit more vintage, if I can say so. All of them are pretty modern, I think. Depends what your amp is, to be fair. Again, more of a death metal one. Clusterfuck. The Coloscope. I really like this one. The high end is really clean, I think. But pretty aggressive at the same time, you know. I'm a big fan of this kind of clean, EQ'd high end. That one's a bit more crunchy on the high mids, and it supports the low end really well. I'm might use this one if I'm recording a song that has really low, like 9-string shit, like. I can't believe how clear this is. I like the Gonojira one. It feels like it has some kind of high-end coating to it. I don't know, it feels like there's something around the 6K, 7K region that's a little bit separate from the tone. It's a fizz that goes with it, but it's like it's not overwhelming at all. It's just like coating it. I like it. You know what, I think all of them support the low end in a really nice way in the lower mids. Darker one. You might like this if you're into like slightly more vintage metal, not super modern gent or whatever. As a sound engineer, I think like in a song where the guitars are not the most important part, where they're kind of in the background and you get like vocals and synths and stuff like that in the front, it might be better to have a darker IR. It eats less of the room in the high end. Or even if you think of song structure, I would use different IRs for different parts of a song, because like for a chorus, if the melody is super important and the guitars are kind of just playing power chords in the background, I would use a darker IR like this, I think. And then when the riff becomes the important part and that the guitars have to be in the foreground, then I would switch to an IR like this one that has more high end, where you get more precisely what's going on with palm mutes or whatever. Rectifier. I was gonna say it reminds me of some 2000 Meshuggah style tone. Obviously I'm using a Meshuggah guitar, but I guess it's supposed to be a kind of Mesa Boogie cab, so it would make sense. Really aggressive. That's a kind of smooth top in comparison. Short but thin. I'm not a huge fan of the way that one deals with the high end, but honestly, it's like, it's just in comparison with the other ones, because I would still use this, you know. I think all of them are really usable. The correct mix, this would fit. Slow but painful. so full. I live for this kind of really, very complete frequency response, I think, that goes all the way up to the very high in a pretty clean way. There's something about the low end or maybe mids here that almost reminds me of a bass cab. I'm not sure why. It holds really well the low end, as most of them do. That's the point, I think. This might be my current favorite impulse response right now. Knocked Up is exactly what I just said earlier about the frequency response being very clean and very complete and goes all the way from the very subs to the very topmost high end around 20k something. It's just like all the frequencies I hear, it's got everything I want. Maybe too much high end for some of you, depending on what kind of tone you're used to. I don't know, I just love it. The faster stuff gets so precise with that kind of top end. Knockdown is the opposite, where it's pretty dark, and you might either want that if you want the guitars to be a bit more in the background, or if you like the kind of harshness that it gives to the maybe 4K, 3K, 5K, somewhere like this region, because the fact that there's nothing after it makes this part more resonant, and it's kind of crunchy if you want your riffs to be a bit aggressive to the ears in a good way. That one's nasty. I really like Doomsos as well, the smoother top end on it that extends pretty far. This isn't Bogren, this is the default 57 that the plugin gives you, which like isn't bad by any means. It's fine to play with, but if I wanted to use this in a mix, I would need quite a bit of EQing afterwards. But if you have an IR that sounds like that from the get-go, you'll have so little to do, you know. I think it's great for artists who don't want to spend too much time on mixing and they would rather be playing with a great tone right away. But as an engineer, it's also great that I don't have to spend too much time on the stuff that's really technical and doesn't, you know, make me creative. Because after all, even when I'm mixing, I still feel like an artist, you know. It's still like, it's art, it's music. I have to vibe with it. And if my sources like drum samples and guitar cabs and etc. sound amazing from the get-go, I can spend less time mixing overall and mix more music, which is what I want to do, but also spend more of the mixing time doing stuff that's really inspiring and creative instead of only technical, you know. So this is it. These were the 30 impulse responses that you get, and honestly, there's not a single one that I don't like, you know. I definitely have favorites, and there's one that I'm gonna use less, but I've tried many cab packs before, and there's a bunch I like, but there's so many of them that throw 1,000 at you again, and most of them sound terrible, and you have to find the gems here and there and then still kind of EQ it. So for now, this is my home. If you're recording, I think it's really important to have several favorite impulse responses and not just one holy grail, because an impulse response will not give you a flat response. You know, it will have all sorts of dips and peaks and then slope down in high end. But if you're using the same impulse response on the left guitar and right guitar and additional guitar and lead guitar and everything, it builds up. Like the peaks become more peaks and more peaks, and at the end you have a mix where the 4K is sounding like this and you have to EQ it out. And same for the dips, you will have to boost them back up because everything will build down to a mix that misses something. And it's fine to EQ it in a bus or whatever, but I think it makes for a wider and fatter mix if you just use different impulse responses for every guitar that you have in a mix, because then every bit that had a dip is being completed by a different IR, and it's like all the IRs will complete each other to make a really flat response in the end. But it won't be like this one bunch of guitars that all sound the same and that are cluttered in the same frequency space. It will be like the flat response that you get in your mix comes from all parts of the stereo spectrum and also the width of the mix, because the lead guitars will be a bit further away and the additional guitars there and the rhythm guitars like here. And it's like all these different frequencies are everywhere around you and they build up to a really full fat mix, but in the bigger way, you know what I mean? So this is it. I'm gonna keep playing with this on my own because honestly I'm so hyped about it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that's unclear, if you would want a video about what impulse responses are or whatever you want to see next from me. I'll be there. Cheers. Bye.